My name is Greg Nilges. This video is in support of Sonoran Desert Institute's FTH 212, their striker fired course, and today's date is the 28th of June 2024. Taking advantage of a little bit of nice moderate weather here in Northern Virginia. And first of all, no live ammunition in the workspace. And our firearm we have in front of us, we have an empty feed source, and the firearm is visually and physically inspected to be free of any ammunition. So we've got that out of the way. As far as references go, didn't really use one, but let's just say to check the block, I used the lecture series in this FTH 212 program. So what the first prompt in part one is going to be, we're going to demonstrate areas of the firearm that you'll be particularly interested in inspecting. Typically, we think about this with used firearms, but with new firearms as well, in my opinion. So first of all, you're going to do a visual inspection of the firearm. If it's used, you can expect maybe to see some holster wear. So that'd be like some of the finish, whatever the melanite or whatever the finish may be, Cerakote or phosphate or whatever, may be worn off from holster wear. That's kind of normal and doesn't really show abusive wear at all. But any gouges or nicks in the frame would show indications of possibly being dropped or mishandled. So that's the first thing you're going to do, is just look over the gun visually. All around, just to give you an idea kind of what you're dealing with. In this case is a new firearm, this dagger that we're going to demonstrate on. The first area I'm going to talk about is the barrel, and this is a clear firearm. So you're going to inspect the barrel. You could do it removed from the firearm or not, and you like to inspect the crown. And in this one, believe it or not, in this new one, it had burrs all the way around it. So I took a Scotch-Brite pad and kind of worked it around. And got a lot of that off, but I'm going to take this crowning polisher off, at some point, and polish that off a little more and smooth it out. We're not looking at supreme accuracy on this firearm, but that certainly was not going to help the case. So then going on, you're going to check the firearm and just exercise the cycle of operation in it best you can. If you have snap caps or dummy rounds available, I didn't bring any outside with me right now, but you utilize those so you could confirm feeding, chambering. Of course, locking you can do with or without the dummy round, but dummy round's better. And you can also use the dummy rounds to do extracting and ejecting and that kind of stuff. But really, you're just running the gun. We'll do it without the magazine in, so we can really feel it without locking back every time. How's it feel? Is it grab anywhere? Is it loose anywhere? And then, of course, you're going to check the trigger and make sure it doesn't stack noticeably in excess, and or the trigger pull isn't in excess or there's binding or anything like that. So you're going to kind of just basically do a function check with it, using with and or without snap caps. You probably won't be able to do a complete disassembly, but you should be allowed to do a field strip, and at that point you can take a closer look at the barrel. I like to take a white piece of paper and put it in front of the barrel so I can look down and the white paper reflects back up into the barrel. You can check the condition of the lands and grooves. Check the condition of the chamber. You're looking for any indications of bulging on the barrel, anything like that. Not expected on a new firearm, but definitely a used firearm. You never know. And you can also, without removing the striker, you can also confirm the striker's operation just by exercising the safety and pushing it and seeing if the striker doesn't look like it's damaged in any way. So you can do a lot on these striker fired guns. You can do a lot of internal inspection without actually disassembling the firearm past the field strip. Don't really need to do a lot that you do on other firearms. But then you can take a look at the frame and the internals in it and just exercise that and see if everything looks like it's moving right. Make sure that everything there's no corrosion or anything along those lines. And that's pretty much what you're looking at. You're also going to check your magazines, make sure the body's not damaged at all, make sure your follower's in good shape, and your spring is springy. So that's it for overall inspection of the firearm, and from there we'll go on to part two in the next segment. Okay, for part two of this video, we do not have a functional firearm in front of us. We have no live ammunition in the workspace. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee. For this one, we're going to identify 10 areas, the different learning experiences we had throughout this course, and then we're going to talk about why they were learning experiences and how we're going to further them and that kind of thing. So first and foremost, I'm going to say one thing I found as a learning experience was the key elements of the history of the striker fired platform. That's one. A second one would be a reacquaintance with the complete disassembly and reassembly. Over the course of the last 10, 12 plus years, I've done a complete disassembly on a Glock pattern firearm before, but only on 2 occasions and not real recently. So it was a reacquaintance. It wasn't so much a learning as it was kind of a relearning. Number 3, foundational understanding of the cycle of operation as it applies to the striker-fired handgun. And number 4, function of key internal components as well as the components they interact with and their role in the cycle of operation. Number 5, a deeper understanding of the trigger safety and internal safeties of the platform. And number 6, some key differences of the various manufacturers' designs, primarily on the internals and how they work, whether it be the safety or the hammer bar system or whatever the case may be, or trigger bar, I should say, not hammer bar. Number 7, proper method to test headspace with utilizing gauges. Nothing earth-shattering there, but it's always nice to have some good instruction on how to do it. Number 8, understanding which components have the most effect on trigger feel and which on trigger pull weight. And that kind of plays into this next one. And the next one is 9th, the proper areas to address when performing a stone/polished trigger job on a striker-fired handgun. So we've got we've received an instructional video on that, and I intend in the future to actually execute that on this firearm. And last but not least, the foundational knowledge on the performance and application of stippling on a polymer frame firearm. So that's 10. Now, why were these key learning experiences, or why did I find they were? They're either skills I didn't have before or skills I had and were able to refine or strengthen. So that's why I consider them key learning experiences. And how do I plan to strengthen those? Primarily, I'm going to focus on the different manufacturers' designs in the striker-fired platform, such as compared to the Glock, which I'm pretty comfortable with, but not so much with the Smith & Wessons, the Springfields, Canics, Walthers, you know, you name it. There's a bunch of different ones out there, and there's a lot of similarities, and there's a few different areas within the design that I am not really comfortable with, and that's what I'm going to focus on to continue learning the striker-fired platform. Okay, for part 3, we're going to talk about a modification I'd like to do this firearm. No live ammunition, no functional firearm. The first thing, it's not really count for this, but I'm going to say right off the bat, and I've said it in a discussion before, I'm going to drive these roll pins out and replace them with Glock pins because I am not a fan. So let's get that out of the way. One thing I'm going to do to it, but it won't be what I focus on, I'm going to do, which I alluded to in part 2, I'm going to do a trigger job on this, not changing the springs or anything like that, or the connector. I'm going to just try a polishing, do a before and after feel, you know, subjective feel test, and then a more objective trigger pull weight and see if it affects it. I doubt if it'll affect the trigger pull weight much, but it should affect the feel. But what I'm going to focus on for this, modification wise, if I was going to do one significant modification to this, it's going to be change the sights. I'm not a big fan of 3-dot sights, particularly when they're all the same color. We won't go into detail on that. We don't have the time. But I am going to put a set of, I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, but if I were to do it, or if we're to make a modification, I would change the sights on here. It's not my primary weapon, so I'm not too worried about it. But if I was, I'd put a set of night sights on here, either a black rear, completely blacked out, or dissimilar colors for front and rear. And what would I charge for that? Where's that? How much would you take to complete this? Time-wise, you're looking at, with a proper sight pusher, which I have, you're looking at a half hour if you're taking your time. Longer if you're actually doing precision sighting to make sure that the sight's exactly where you want it. You may be up to an hour or even 2 hours there. That could take a little bit of time. Cost-wise, I would charge about $25 to do this on a Glock. And my next question is, how does this compare with the rates in our area? I looked up one place and they say $35 for most handgun sights. That tells me that some are more, but $35, I can't see it on a Glock. I couldn't see it falling into the category of more. So I would say they want $35. So I'm a little cheaper, but I don't have the overhead either. Well, frankly, I have no overhead because I'm not a shop or don't have an FFL at the time. But I was in yesterday when I was picking up my hammer-fired gun for this next week into the local gun shop, real small mom and pop operation, great people. And a guy came in and wanted new sights put on his Glock, and they only charged him $20. And I told Rex, the owner, I said, "Hey man, that's a really that's a really competitive price, and I think it is. But they're good people, so I'm not surprised. So my cost is right in line with that. He did say when I mentioned that to him, he said I charge more for other firearms. He said Smiths are harder to do and Springfields can be harder to do, and it kind of just depends. But I think it goes into one of the facts is the front sight on the Glock isn't dovetailed in; it's just held with that screw, which makes it a lot easier to get out. And he also said some manufacturers actually Loctite in their dovetailed sights, which baffles me and it baffles him as well. And that's more time because you got to defeat that with some form of heat. I think that's it for part 3. That's it for FTH 212 Module 5 and FTH 212 overall. Hope I've met my marks.